Right now, I think blockchain is being applied to a bunch of different industries. So, from my standpoint, I think for our business, we're looking at initially companies that are in ad tech or advertising, applying it to that space. But ultimately, from a category standpoint, we want to be across all areas because it's about the brands and how they interact with blockchain for their own specific business.
What's the unique selling point of blockchain?
And I think it's decentralization. Very simply, it's that you have a open and transparent ledger model that has enables peer-to-peer connectivity rather than a centralized model or database model.
Where's the market pressure coming from?
I think that it's being created by the companies that are launching within the space. So it's how they're applying blockchain to business models that could disrupt current state models. So initially it's finance, obviously, with cryptocurrency, but there's disruption happening within healthcare and a bunch of other industries, frankly, and ad tech is obviously another area it's looking to be applied to.
So one main barrier for blockchain adoption?
I think that the decentralized model doesn't always have to apply. I think that it's a database structure in some sense, and in some sense that it's better to have a centralized model versus a decentralized model. I think that's being resolved with side chains and with other structures that are being used with blockchain. Ultimately, I kind of see this as like an inversion of infrastructure where you're going to see a lot of models that didn't necessarily apply to blockchain and how that is structured being applied, and that's going to help evolve the technology itself so that it can be applied to across all digital and internet businesses. In ad tech, you had standardized bodies like the IAB that drove those standards, and the industry got behind them. But even those standards are fragmented in a sense that everyone kind of bastardizes the OpenRGB standard or any of them, frankly, because they need to be able to have the ability. Also, the challenge with the standard is that it levels the playing field and anybody can access it, and it also allows for scale. The opportunity is that it allows for scale. The downside to it is that it's if it's it's very difficult to get everyone because companies are trying to differentiate. They don't want to always use a standard because that locks them into what everyone else has and makes them parity. So I think where the standard will come from, to answer the question, is large companies and standard bodies that organize within the ecosystem.
So how are we going to ensure that blockchain won't turn into just another buzzword?
I think that there's already demonstrated real value behind it, and I think the first application and most successful has been currency. So I think that we're kind of beyond the buzz phrase statement at this point. The question will be whether is it relevant in the future? Is it something that you talk about, or is it just internet and technology and it kind of fades to the background? I ultimately believe it kind of will fade to the background. I think that's like every major technology breakthrough. The difference here seems that it's the technology is forcing different business models, and I don't think the net result of that, you may not talk about it in the terms of blockchain in the future. It's just maybe how you structure a business or how you develop technology, but in the future it may be something, it's just how businesses are organized. Peer-to-peer is the new model versus centralized models.
I'm sure we've covered it, but what's your one main future prediction?
I think that there's a concept of the inverted infrastructure. So I think that means that the old infrastructure will ride on the new infrastructure. I think we're going to see that within digital, where old business models will convert and eventually ride on the new infrastructure of blockchain. And from there, you also see a bunch of new business models and capabilities come from that or generate from that. So in the future, I think it'll all be riding on blockchain in some form or derivative of it today.
So tell me your number.
Number's 915. That relates to the number of ICOs listed on Coincap, which is one of the largest exchanges, as compared to 4,000 actively traded stocks that are on the NASDAQ and NYSE or other public exchanges, and 15,000 listed stocks. It's essentially a 4-to-1 ratio. So 4,000 listed versus non-listed would be this equivalent in my mind of ICOs versus companies that are building tech that will become ICOs in the future. So there's still 4x growth opportunity as compared to a public markets, but I also think we're seeing such fast, rapid adoption of this right now that will exceed the 19,000 overall public companies there are today in blockchain, based on the amount of investments going into the space, and ultimately, have a many more companies that are ICO'd than there are public.